Ladies and gentlemen, let's start off by saying when you look back at the original novel by Mary Shelley, Frankenstein is not a horror tale. Now, today it would be considered probably more science fiction than horror. Let me explain. Back in Mary's day, it probably was very horrific. The idea of a man stealing body parts, piecing them together to make a new being was certainly horrifying. But in today's real life medical world, we're constantly trading limbs and organs and artificial limbs and brains and hearts, and everything is going every which way. So the idea of manipulating a body with various parts from other people and sometimes even other animals, that's not so much horrific anymore. It's what we call medicine. Okay. So if you look at it from today's perspective, Frankenstein is more of a story about poor parenting than it is horror. Now, that's not to say that some parents can't be horrible in their parenting needs, but I think you get my point. And that's what makes tonight's lesson plan all the more interesting. As cinematic class is about to begin, and your professor is in. Greetings, salutations, another sundry affair. I am your cinematic professor and purveyor of truth in movies. Tonight's lesson plan is Frankenstein, written and directed by Guillermo del Toro, and it's a Netflix Studios production. Folks, let me tell you something. Frankenstein has been iconic in a number of ways as depicted on celluloid. Of course, Karloff is considered the quintessential Frankenstein, if you will. He his creature evoked sympathy and empathy, but basically it was a horror film. Okay. Christopher Lee followed in vain. Christopher Lee took the Hammer films took a different venue. The creature in that wasn't so much a blockhead with electrodes coming out of its neck, but more like a badly mutilated person who was literally just kind of put together by Peter Cushing as Victor Frankenstein, and various incarnations throughout. Some years back, Kenneth Branagh decided to make a movie of Frankenstein that was truer to the novel. And for that, he cast himself as Victor Frankenstein and cast Robert De Niro as Frankenstein. Now, a lot of people poo pooed that movie because it wasn't a horror movie. All right, it actually kind of stuck to the novel and was more of a tragedy, a science fiction tragedy, if you will. But the movie was well made, and if you've read the original novel, you see where they got this movie from. Now, Del Toro wanted to create a similar type movie, one that was maybe not as true to the novel, but certainly one that captured the, as he put it, Miltonian tones of the story. And I believe he has done that and done it exceptionally well. One thing I will give Del Toro credit for, whether I like his particular movie or not, he works with his editors and his cinematographer especially, and they literally work wonders. his movies are so visually entertaining that if the movie itself slips and maybe isn't up to speed, man, you could just watch it because it looks great. This movie is absolutely no different. His shot framing, his blocking of key characters, his use of a wide angle lens, which is essential for good movie making, and his use of color and lighting. They're just amazing. He had a little bit of help on this with his, check my notes here, with his director of photography, his cinematographer, Dan Larston, did a really nice job in putting this all together. The look is, even in the beginning, okay, there's a scene where young Victor Frankenstein experiences the death of his mother. He's wearing a white nightshirt, and you could see his hand as he grips himself in sorrow, and the handprint of his mother in blood on the back of his nightshirt, and the stark contrast there. It's good stuff. It's good stuff to see, and the scenes up in the North Pole are just, they're pretty impressive, pretty incredible. So there are some big changes in this version of the story. Let's talk about the creature first, because Del Toro actually started working on this movie all the way back in 2008. And a couple of things like strikes and Universal's dabbling into creating the Dark Universe, which fizzled out, kind of put this on the back burner for a long time too. But originally, Doug Jones was supposed to be the creature in this version of the movie, and Del Toro has worked with Doug Jones on several movies. They're a very good combination. When that didn't work out, there were other actors that were brought in. Benedict Cumberbatch was considered as part being the creature in the movie. And then when he couldn't do it, Andrew Garfield was put in there. In fact, all of the designs for the creature uh, really were made for Andrew Garfield. And then at the very last minute, he had to back out, and they called in Jacob Elordi, who was considerably different physically than Garfield, a lot taller and a little bit broader. And as a result, all of the designs had to be redone pretty much at the last minute. And that's interesting because this version of Frankenstein is not hacking off an arm from one person and putting that on a torso, hacking off a leg from another and putting that on. This version of Frankenstein has Victor Frankenstein literally creating a new person. So he'll not only maybe get an arm, but he'll open that arm up and he's adding the ligaments, he's adding the muscles, he's adding the bone structure from different things. I mean, he literally is building this. It's not just taking parts and assembling them into a body. He's literally building this thing from scratch. And in that aspect, this is certainly a different approach. One of the biggest fears when I saw that Del Toro was doing this with Netflix was that Netflix would infuse its very woke and annoying agenda, which frankly I think Netflix will attempt to do on everything as long as Barry and Michelle are part of its dictatorial board. They need to dump those two and dump them quick. That aside, when you pull in a big name like Del Toro, and he signed a multi movie deal with Netflix after the success of his animated version of Pinocchio, um, there's only so far you can push those directors. If they want to do something, they're not as easily amenable to having agendas tossed into their scripts. He does slip a little bit on this one, though, and that is in the character of Elizabeth. Now, Elizabeth traditionally was a woman of the time. She was an aristocrat. She was very demure. She did not exhibit any of the characteristics that would be associated with feminism of today, but not so in this movie. Elizabeth is played by Mia Goth, and yeah, she's irritating as hell in this. She really is. And she's the type of character you just like to, pardon the phrase, bitch slap and get her back into things. I mean, she doesn't fit in with these times. They give her a modern feminist woman type of perspective, and they season it with the bohemian artistic uh, seasonings of someone who would live in Sedona. Okay. And the combination just doesn't fit. It doesn't work well. And if there's any weak character in this entire movie, it's her. All right, let's take a little look now behind the scenes. Oscar Isaac plays Victor Frankenstein. He does a very good job. He's a very good actor. However, in this case, he's probably too ethnic looking to really play the role. His brother William is played by Felix Kammerer, and yeah, there's a big difference. you know, if you would look at these two side by side, you would say, "How in the hell did you think these two were going to pass off as brothers?" So, yeah, that part of it's a little bit sketch. Christoph Waltz is in this. He's another one of those actors that you are hard pressed to find him do a bad performance. He just doesn't. He's excellent in this as Henrik Harlander, who is Elizabeth's dad, and uh, he becomes Frankenstein's benefactor monetarily, but he has his own little secrets as to why he's funding all this money to Victor's dream. I already told you that Jacob Elordi plays the creature. There are times in this where the makeup, wow, I think they kind of missed the boat. The creature almost looks like a member of the Guardians of the Galaxy. Okay, it looks more like a slapped together canvas version of an android rather than parts of a human. As the character, the creature, begins to age and I guess you might say heal a little bit from its original operations, it begins to look more like a deformed man rather than something that you would find I don't know, in an H.R. Geiger movie or something like that. Okay. Also in this is Lars Mikkelsen. He plays Captain Andrews. They do something unique. In Kenneth Branagh's version, they find Victor Frankenstein up in the north. They hear his story, and then it wraps up when the monster shows up at the boat. This one takes it a bit further. They find Victor, they hear his story, then the creature shows up, and the creature is able to tell his story or his viewpoint. And in this case, Del Toro has made or transformed a horror tale, even if you will, a science fiction tale, and turned it into a more tragic human story, a story between, if you allow the stretch, father and son, creator, and createe, if you will, as the story takes place. I already mentioned Evan and Dan as the editor and the cinematographer, uh, and they certainly do a great job working with Del Toro. But when you pull in one of these big name directors like Del Toro, they bring with them people who are. I mean, the musical score for this movie was done by Alexandre Desplat. Wow, I mean, Google the movies he's done, and you'll go, "Oh yeah, I know those songs." He's just an incredible composer, and he does not fail in this endeavor. The musical score for this is can you say quite listenable? It's the type of thing that if you download it, you put it on in the background as you're doing stuff, and it'll set your mood. So all told, this version of Frankenstein by Del Toro is quite enjoyable. Visually, it's tremendous to watch. If I have to nitpick at some things, the Elizabeth character, as played by Mia Goth, um, totally needs rewritten. Her acting in this probably fits in with the character, but the character doesn't fit. Okay, it's just it's it's really a blister on a relatively smooth narrative story. The other thing is that, and I say this a lot, it's too long. Okay, I know it's an epic story, if you will, but this could really have been trimmed down. It goes about 2.5 hours long, and they probably could have told this tale in under 2 hours, and it would have been more compact, more forceful, more energetic. There are some scenes that really kind of drag in this, and it's only the cinematography and the lighting that pull you through it, so that you don't wander mentally away from the screen. This is in theaters now. It's going to be appearing on Netflix. This is one time I'm going to say, folks, you probably, if you can, you want to see this on the big screen. It is that impressive as far as the look is concerned, and the use of those wide angle lenses on the big screen. It's really something to see. And your small TV at home, even if it's 55 inches, is just not going to capture the visual that Del Toro has put into this movie. So if you can, I would strongly recommend that you catch it on the big screen. I enjoyed this one immensely. 2.5 hours, and I was able to sit in my chair without squirming around an awful lot, and that says something, especially for old film critics in my age bracket. And I got to tell you, just as a little aside here, I understand what Kenneth Branagh did, and you can certainly watch his movie if you are in that frame of mind. Del Toro's will be like that. If you want the real story rather than the Hollywood hype up, this is a very good film to watch. I still, however, would like to see a quality director do a version of Frankenstein and go back to the horror elements that Universal did back in the 30s. There was a rumors back ago with the Dark Universe, Javier Bardem was going to play the creature and what have you, and that it was truly going to be horrific. It's one thing that may never come to be in cinema, but I think it would be worthwhile. And now that you have learned what you have learned, here,